I woke up this morning pretty early and then I remembered, oh my God, episode 4 of Fear the Walking Dead, the Morgan episode, it's out. So I got out of bed and instantly put it on my iPad. And I was watching the episode before I did anything, which is pretty pathetic to admit. I have a whole morning ritual, but I spent my morning watching Fear the Walking Dead. But in fairness, I was really excited to see this because I love Morgan. I love Clear. It's my favorite episode of The Walking Dead. So to see that we were getting an episode where we go back to kind of where Morgan became Clear Mode Morgan, go back to his house where Duane and Jenny were and all that stuff in King County, that was extremely exciting to me. And I gotta say, on the fronts for the canon series portion of The Walking Dead, if I'm going to give a TLDR, I will say that it was a bit of a mixed bag. I loved canon elements of this episode, such as seeing Duane and Jenny and a little bit of references to the episode Clear, as well as other speeches Morgan's gave in The Walking Dead. But on the other hand, this was probably one of the worst episodes of Fear the Walking Dead in terms of just mere stupidity in classic Fear fashion. So we're going to jump into all of that and more in this video, so let's begin. So quite literally the first shot of this episode is Morgan basically stepping on the King County sign because there's just King County signs in the middle of the road, and in a middle open road in the real world, Morgan just steps on this and looks at it and goes, okay, no, realistically, I know this is a show, so sometimes they have to play up the theatrics and all of that, but the first shot is him going back there and literally stepping on the sign, so that ultimately opens the door to be like, how did he get here? Why did he get here? What's going on? What the fuck is oatmeal? You know what I mean? Like, it just, of course, has you asking all these questions. And of course, Morgan just magically appears back in King County. But again, I'm willing to put all of that behind me because, in fairness, I didn't really care that much. And I was willing to suspend a little bit of disbelief for this episode. Oh, and apologies for my hair looking quite literally like Kramer. Yeah. I know it's bad. But regardless, I'm willing to suspend a little bit of disbelief for that, even though it really doesn't make any sense. We don't know where Padre is, but the fact that he could just run back to King County is just kind of crazy. I like, how did he get there? Well, whatever. Anyway, he gets there, he sees the house, he tries to open the door to the house, and then he starts having flashbacks and these moments of terror or whatever. So he runs away and kind of goes back into Clear mode the way he was in season 8 of The Walking Dead, where he was saying he was supposed to and all of that stuff. And then he goes back and he sees a ton of walkers that are eating a skunk, so he decides to take out his anger on them and beat them up. And it was a pretty cool scene. My favorite takeaway from the scene was, of course, Lenny James's acting. He just did such an incredible job. I mean, just him screaming, him going back into that mode, even the fight sequence, even though, again, in Fear the Walking Dead fashion, it was a little goofy or whatever, it still was just, it was so nice to see Lenny James really give it his all. And then, after he's done killing the skunk eaters, out of nowhere we see a Padre car come back because, oh, magically Padre just found him in King County. But no, as it turns out, it's actually Grace, which, in fairness, opened up even more questions, but it was quickly answered when she explained that Morgan, in more of like a clear or like crazy state, gave her a ping of where he was going to be. Still, regardless, that was another goofy Fear the Walking Dead moment. But anyway, just so happens that Grace and Morgan are talking, and out of nowhere, they look in the back of Grace's pickup truck, and what do you know? Mo is there. What? Here we go with the Fear the Walking Dead stupidity. I can't remember specifically if Grace knew that she was there or not. I don't remember, but regardless, Mo's actress's acting in it was, I'm sorry, it was not good. And I gotta say, for this episode overall, no offense to the actress, either it was on the page or, you know, the actress herself, but it was flat, man. everything didn't seem believable. The dialogue was very just like clear cut, and it makes me think, is it hard to cast people? Like, is it really that difficult to cast good actors and stuff like that? And look, I do for the most part understand that usually when it comes to bad acting, especially in a show surrounded with people who are good actors, it's usually more about what's on the page than it is the actor, because some things are just really hard to portray as it is. So I'll give it a little bit of benefit of the doubt, but I still think Grace's acting, or Mo's acting, was just a little goofy. But anyway, so we get a little bit of them and they start to head back to the house. And what I really liked as they're starting to head back to the house is we get a speech essentially, which was pretty much one for one, just with added detail of clear speech, the speech that Morgan gives to Rick when they first reunite in season 3. I think it's like episode 8 or 6 or whatever, where he's talking about how he was checking out a cellar, and when he came up, Jenny was just on Duane and all of that stuff. The dialogue there, the monologue, I should say, that Lenny James gives about what happened is very similar. It's almost as if they literally were just plagiarizing a paper in a college essay and they just wanted to fluff it up with extra words. That's what it felt like, and that's honestly, in fairness, not too much of a slant, because I actually liked it. I liked the extra information that we got out of it. It didn't leave me wanting more with clarity as far as what occurred that day and all of that stuff. There was a lot of little loose ends that were left in the original clear speech with Morgan, especially when it comes to him saying, like, all I see is red, all of that stuff. Morgan actually explained that here and how that was actually blood, and he saw all of that and just ran away, and he just didn't know what to do. He instinctively killed Jenny, and that's kind of what happened. He said he blacked out after that, essentially. But I really, really liked that. And that was just great to finally have some closure there. And a lot of this episode, and we're going to get into it, but a lot of this episode really focused on closure of canon elements of the story, which was fantastic. But then it was sprinkled in with really stupid moments, like whoop-de-doo, Dwight and Sherry just come out of nowhere, and they're there too. This is the classic Fear the Walking Dead plague. People just come out of nowhere. I didn't even mention that in the last episode with Dan Salazar and Madison. Not only was it extremely random, but it was also weird as heck that Dan didn't even act surprised or anything. He's just like, oh, hey, Madison. Yeah, it's been 7 years, as Morgan says, and now you're just like not shocked at all. Whatever. But it bothers me, but whatever. Oh, and speaking of things cheesy, before I even get to Dwight and Sherry, one thing that I found really goofy is immediately Mo, after they just find her in the back of the pickup truck, Mo's like, is this about Duane and Jenny? Like, dude, you don't even know the character. You don't even know your dad. Like, what? It was so silly, and it made me just so cringe. It made me just cringe. I don't know how else to describe it. It was like, dude, first off, you wiped off the wall for no apparent reason in the first episode. Like, what did you have? Some instinctive, like, ability to know that this was his son? And, like, it was just weird. And now you're bringing it back up, and then Morgan's like, oh, she's smart. Like, this is just weird. I don't even know how... I don't even know how this happened. Whatever. But anyway, Dwight and Sherry come into town, and I know a lot of people for this episode, they thought that Dwight and Sherry were going to kind of like play the bad guy and then become good, and that kind of did happen. We're fast forwarding a little bit, but in the moment, of course, they came across like evil, that they want to bring him back to Padre and all of that stuff. But realistically, their reasoning made perfect sense. It was for Finch, and they reasoned with Morgan, and Morgan understood it. So it never came across like, oh, they're the bad guys. It just came across like, look, we want our kid. We want to do what's right for us. I hope you understand that, all that stuff. So in fairness, I could get behind that, and I didn't mind that. But as they're negotiating, Morgan pulls out the stick and has Mo and Grace run away, and then he runs away shortly after. And where do they run? They run to the house from episode 1 of The Walking Dead, and oh my God, I put in my notes, if you could see this, I don't know. Okay, you're definitely not going to be able to see this, but there's a part in my notes that says, wow, they went to the house in episode 1. Okay, I just had to share that because I put it in all caps and put like 30 W's in there because in in actuality, I was genuinely really surprised to see that. And not only was I surprised to see that, I was surprised to see that it was a one for one recreation. I didn't know until after the episode that they fully rebuilt it, but if you know anything about production and stuff like that, you should understand that they don't usually keep sets, especially from that far back, because they usually redress them or use them for other stuff. So it was really great to see how well this was outfitted to look just like even the exterior, just like the house in the first episode of The Walking Dead. It was immediate nostalgia. The whole time we were in there, I just felt the spirit of Rick Grimes, and it was awesome. The set piece looked phenomenal. Seeing Morgan go back there, and even though I don't love Grace or Mo, seeing them there with a changed Morgan was just so phenomenal. It really put things full circle. And if anything that I could say, I really did find that satisfying, and I found a lot of the moments we got with Morgan and his reflections. I found them all very satisfying. But regardless, we get explanation in the episode that Morgan went back there after Duane had passed and turned and all of that stuff, and he was writing on the walls, and Morgan didn't even realize. He's like, I don't even remember. I must have been blacked out. I don't remember coming back here. And I like that because the writing on the walls is a little goofy, and Mo even said something like that about it. He's like, why did you write on the walls? Like, what's up with the writing? And I forget what his reasoning was, or maybe I'm making that up. I don't know, but I'm pretty sure something like that happened. But regardless, they go back, and of course, the rifle's there from the first episode, and all stupidity aside, even though, of course, in classic Fear the Walking Dead fashion, it's way too convenient that the rifle from, 11 years ago or however many is just still there. But whatever, it doesn't really matter. I liked what we got there, and I liked how Morgan said a man named Rick Grimes gave me this to do what I was supposed to do. And I like how Grace mentioned it. We, of course, saw that in the trailer, but it was really nice to see in person because you felt the spirit of Rick Grimes throughout that whole scene, of course. But that was quickly interrupted by Dwight and Sherry with the accompaniment of two other Padre soldiers just there outside. And their thing was, Morgan, come out, or we're going to burn these walkers and have them slowly walk to the front door, which I thought it was so goofy. And I know they explained it in such a way like, look, this is the deal. Come out, or we're going to do this. We don't want to do this. I know you don't want it, blah, blah, blah. So that was kind of acting as like a ticking time bomb. I get it, but it just felt like classic Fear the Walking Dead goofiness. But anyway, they end up negotiating, and the whole thing was essentially for them to fight back. And eventually it kind of comes full circle so that Dwight and Sherry and the two Padre people, they come and basically intercept that group. But Mo ran off to the first house, the house that Morgan was initially scared to go in. So Mo went off there, and Grace and Morgan stayed behind at the other house. And then, of course, Padre holds him at gunpoint and is threatening to kill him. But no, they're never going to kill Morgan because that's Morgan. So even though he really is in just the randomness of this world, he's really expendable to these Padre soldiers. He's so important to us, so he has to stay alive. But they, of course, these writers put us in another life or death scenario with Morgan, which was just not necessary. But anyway, okay, you know what? This goes on for a minute, but it's just in my head. It's making me crack up at what shortly thereafter happens. After they threaten to kill Morgan and they're about to pull the trigger, Morgan pulls the gun away, and Dwight takes the, I guess it's radio or whatever it is, and he's like, hey, Finch, are you right there? And Finch is like, yeah, Dad. And he's like, do that chimney sweep. Do you remember that thing I taught you, a chimney sweep? And immediately when he says chimney sweep, Fitz just takes out Shrike. Like, that was the most Fear the Walking Dead moment I've ever seen. Dwight played him like it was a fucking RC car. It was the funniest thing. Just click the button, Dwight takes her. I thought it was so funny. It was so goofy. But in fairness, it was cool and it was fun, but it was so goofy. It was one of those moments that this show is like, oh my God, this is so bad, it's good. That's how it felt. It felt on the same level, in my opinion, as a movie like The Room, which is just so bad, it's good. And I think overall, before I get into the rest of the episode, I think overall, Fear the Walking Dead is that it is not a good show. But it's so bad that it becomes good. And again, here and there, and I've said this before, there are moments that when they hit, they hit. And there were some hits in this episode. There were some hits in season 3, season 2, season 1. Even a couple of like season 4 had one hit and stuff like that. But overall, when it hits, it hits. But for the most part, it's goofy. But anyway, after that is all said and done, they fight off the Padre soldiers and Dwight and Sherry. I forget the outcome of specifically what happens there, but it was resolved in a piece. Oh, I remember. Okay, so Dwight and Sherry get Finch out. They take out Shrike. They don't kill her, of course, because God forbid, that's too fucking convenient for the plot. But anyway, so they flee back to Padre, I think. I'm pretty sure that's the series of events that unfolds. And Morgan and Grace go to find Mo, who was at the first house. And it just so happens that that's the house where Duane was, chained up. And of course, at the intro, there's a big writing that says Duane. And then you see him, and Mo's about to get eaten by him, and then the ceiling collapses, and he's there through the smoke, literally the dust settled, and it's Duane, which again is stupid Fear the Walking Dead writing, but I did like it because it was a big moment. So anyway, the dust settles. Duane's there. Of course, he looks terrible, and even as a viewer, it was hard to watch because you're thinking this is someone's son, even if it's a show and all of that. Then you see Morgan come up, and he is clearly damaged by this sight. He sees his son, but then he sees Mo almost about to get eaten by him, which is a perfect 1-for-1 of what happened with Jenny from the original canon series, and Morgan finally does it. And I gotta say, I don't cry often or anything like this, but this one was a bit of a tearjerker. I'm not one for crying in shows and all of that stuff, yada yada. But this one, I thought I was cutting an onion or something. It was a little weird. Anyway, it was a very emotional moment and all that. Anyway, he puts down Duane, and he finally saves Mo the way it should have been from the beginning, which is a perfect story arc completion to Morgan's whole clear mode, whole of everything, because you could tell in this episode he just wanted that closure, and we as an audience wanted that closure. It was so beautiful to see. But anyway, after all the dust is settled, Morgan does what is right and buries Duane and Jenny, and it's done really well. And may I say, the corpse of Jenny was very goofy looking, but I did like how either they hired the same actress or they hired a look-alike, and the makeups just looked so good, the prosthetics and everything. It looked fantastic for Jenny because there were some flashbacks in there, but I think they were current because it looked current, whereas the Duane ones were clearly not because the actor of Duane is way older now in real life. But regardless, I like that. But anyway, back to the story. Morgan had then buried Duane and Jenny, and out of nowhere, just like... Okay, let me get to it. So Mo is on a little perch thing looking at family photos because, of course, somehow the family photos are the one thing that survived. But anyway, family photos, she's looking at them, and she's saying something to Morgan. Then out of nowhere, guess what? Another jump scare. Woohoo! And it was a ridiculous one. This walker, who must have been there for quite some time, where he was from, I don't know, but he was under the debris. He just flies and jumps up. What? Come on.
No way. No way. Get real.
He grabs Mo, and of course, Grace runs in to Mo to help her, and she gets bit. Whoop-de-doo. Okay, but then, of course, they're panicking and all of that stuff, and so they go right back to Padre because they know June's there, who may know that radiation cure. Now, okay, this has been already 20 minutes, pretty much, so I'm going to get into my feelings about this, even though I've intertwined it throughout. I said it in the beginning, and I'm going to say it again. This episode, when it had its moments, but for the most part, it was still in that stupid Fear the Walking Dead bullshit. This episode both disappointed me and satisfied me. And I think everything we got to wrap up Morgan's overarching storyline between the canon series and Fear It was beautiful. I don't have any problems specifically with that, even if the motifs and all of that stuff were cliched and were classic TV motifs and all of that stuff. I liked it because Morgan is my favorite character of all time in the Walking Dead universe. I love him, mainly on The Walking Dead. I love him more than I did on Fear, but regardless, I love Morgan. He's a flawed and not so perfect protagonist, but it's so great to follow him and to see everything get wrapped up was so beautiful. But what I didn't like is how stupid some of these plot points were. Of course, Morgan's just randomly at King County. How he got there, how long it took him to get there, I don't know. And I understand they're trying to rush the story and all of that stuff, but still, like, a little bit of explanation could go a long way here. And then Grace just being there, even though they explained it with like a beacon or whatever, still goofy. And then Dwight and Sherry being there, goofy. And then the whole thing that subsided, especially the Finch thing, even though it was funny and it was like satisfying, that was so goofy. The fact that they did another let's kill Morgan scare, and of course he doesn't die, was goofy. Even though I loved the Duane scene, just what happened there and the dust settling and it's Duane, and then Mo is trapped by what looks like a fucking 2x4. Like, it was just there were some poor writing moments in overarchingly a good moment in writing. So if that made any sense, I don't even know. I just made that part up out of my butt. But what I'm getting at is the overall storyline I really did like, but all the stupidity and the crazy weird moments in Fear the Walking Dead style, they really shined here just as much as the good moments. And I'm very mixed. Did I like this episode? On one front, I loved it. On one front, it's easily the best episode this season because of what we got to wrap up the canon series. And honestly, for that, I would probably so far put it in the S tier of Fear the Walking Dead season 8. But on the other hand, it's like a D tier because the storyline and the convenient plots and all of that stuff was just so goofy. But I have to meet in the middle, and my heart is telling me, in fairness, that the pros outweighed the cons here. I could deal and suspend a little bit of disbelief. I could deal with the stupidity and all of that stuff for what was a good conclusion to Morgan's story. Even though Morgan's story is going to continue on, this felt like a big conclusion to a large portion of that story. And I genuinely thought it was beautiful. So I'm going to say I did. I loved this episode. It was stupid. There were stupid moments, but overall, it was outweighed by a really good full roundscope story ending a lot of Morgan's arc. So yeah, let me know what you guys thought about this episode. I think this is easily going to be one of the more controversial episodes of the season and of the show. And I want to know, did you like it? Did you hate it? What were your thoughts overall? How did you feel about Morgan and all of those things that happened to him putting down Duane? I'm really interested to know down below, so be sure to start an open and professional conversation. It doesn't have to be like work suit and tie professional, but let's keep it civil. Regardless, I hope you liked this video. If you did, give it a like rating and subscribe for more Fear reviews, TV show reviews, and all things TV overall. I watch too much of it. And with all of that out of the way, thank you again so much for watching this video. And until the next one, I'll talk to you later. Peace out.